Have you ever met someone whose mere presence made you feel lighter? They didn't need to say much, didn't offer advice, didn't ask questions. They were simply there, and somehow, you felt calmer. No more pretending, no need to hide, no fear of being misunderstood. As if they carried with them an invisible safe space, where you could finally breathe, truly breathe. Here's the strange thing. You might be that person. You just never realized it. You've always believed that to help others, you needed to be an expert, that you had to learn techniques, earn certifications, and use the right words. But there's a deeper kind of power, the power of presence. You're not trying to heal anyone. You simply walk into a room, and something begins to soften. Voices lower, the atmosphere grows still. People start saying things they've never said before. They cry, and then tell you they feel lighter. No one can explain it, but everyone feels it. The soul begins to heal the moment it encounters something real. And it is your realness, your unforced authenticity, loosens the armor others wear. So, how did you come to hold that space? Not through intellect, but through your fractures, the lonely nights, the losses you never fully put into words, the moments you thought you'd break but didn't. You kept going, quietly collecting the shattered pieces, stitching yourself back together, and in that process, you built a kind of field, not loud, but magnetic, not dazzling, but inviting, a field that makes people want to pause, to sit beside you, to speak without even knowing why. That's why this series of signs was written, not to label you a healer, not to paint a romantic picture, but to remind you, you've been through pain, and yet you're still here, whole, compassionate, deeper than ever before, and it is precisely that truth that begins to heal those around you. You don't need to try. You don't need to prove anything. You only need to remember. You carry a gift, a quiet gift, but more precious than any words. 1. People tell you things they've never told anyone else. Not everyone knows how to listen, and even rarer is the person who can make others open up, without asking, without pressing, without encouraging. They're simply present, genuinely, quietly, and that presence becomes a shelter. Have you ever found yourself in such a situation? A seemingly casual conversation, a coworker talking about work suddenly breaks down and shares their childhood pain. A stranger on the bus opens up about a wound they've never spoken of. When they realize they've crossed a line, they pause, chuckle awkwardly, and say, "I don't know why I just told you all that." But you understand, because it wasn't random, it was the result of the energy you radiate, an invisible field, making the other person feel safe, unjudged, and unpressured. They can't explain why, but something in their senses. This is a place where I can be honest. Carl Jung once said, "The soul is healed when it comes into contact with the real." And you, simply by being you, are that truth. Your listening isn't driven by a desire to heal. And precisely because it isn't, it becomes transparent. You don't speak much, but your silence is not empty. It's a space, a spiritual room where others are allowed to breathe. The world is filled with voices, but it lacks people who can listen with presence. And you, without needing techniques or eloquence, have quietly become a healer, not because you fixed the pain, but because you allowed it to be spoken. And that is when healing begins, not through action, but through the sacredness of simply being there. 2. You can feel others' pain, without being consumed by it. There is a kind of sensing that doesn't come from the ears, but from the heart. When someone enters a room with a strained smile, you don't look at their face. You feel the tightness in their chest. When they say, "I'm fine," you know it's a lie, and you don't call them out. You don't force them to open up. You just stay, like a stillness. That sensitivity is not a weakness. It doesn't make you collapse under other people's emotions. You don't dissolve. You empathize with boundaries. You don't carry their sadness, but you hold it, like you would a child, just enough to make it feel less cold. With you, pain is seen, but not magnified, and that makes all the difference. The world has many people who can feel, but few who can hold. Those who lack inner grounding often get swept away by others' suffering, unconsciously mirroring their own unresolved wounds. But you've walked through your own darkness. You know how to navigate emotional valleys without drowning. That inner steadiness allows others to cry beside you without guilt. They don't worry about you falling apart. 2. They don't need to keep it together. Because your presence is quiet and grounded, assures them that their pain isn't too much. It isn't a burden. It isn't something that needs to be hidden. That's a rare kind of comfort, one that speaks louder than advice. You don't need to say, "I understand," because they feel it in your eyes, in the calm strength of your heart. You are not the one who carries. You are the one who holds. And sometimes, just having a place like that, it's enough to make the pain begin to melt. Free. After being with you, people say, "I feel so much lighter." There are conversations that aren't long, aren't deep, and don't follow any known healing technique. But when they end, the other person falls silent for a moment, then says, almost in surprise, "I don't know why, but I feel so much lighter." That's not a polite thank you. It's the unconscious reaction of a soul that has just loosened its grip. After years of holding everything in, and the person who created that space was you. Not because you gave brilliant advice, not because you tried to comfort them, but because you created a space where others didn't have to pretend to be okay. Where they could breathe at their own rhythm, where they weren't judged. We weren't pressured to be strong, to move on, to be good. You didn't try to change them, and that's precisely why they began to change. That feeling of someone being fully present with you, without asking for anything in return, is rare and priceless. Carl Jung once said, "What is accepted in silence begins to transform," and you are that silence. Your presence doesn't intrude, doesn't stir, doesn't try to edit someone's emotions, and that very stillness becomes the space where their mind begins to rebalance itself. You don't heal with words. You heal with your essence, with the energy you've refined over time, by holding your own wounds when no one else was there. You are a place where others can set down their burdens, without conditions. They come to you and leave lighter, not because you saved them, but because you gave them the space to unravel themselves. And in a world where everyone is trying to speak, you become the rarest presence, someone who knows how to simply be, not to do something, but to be someone. 4. You listen without reacting, interrupting, or rushing to conclusions. The world is growing louder. Everyone wants to be heard, but very few truly know how to listen. And in that noise, you are a rare exception. You don't cut people off. You don't jump in with your own stories. You don't rush to give advice. You're silent, but your silence isn't empty. It's a space, a calm room, lit gently from within. Whoever enters it finds themselves breathing more slowly, speaking softer, even thinking more clearly. When others speak, you don't fidget. You don't panic about finding solutions. You let them speak, even when the story doesn't make sense, even when their voice trembles, even when they themselves don't know what they're trying to say. You wait, not out of politeness, but because you genuinely honor their state of uncertainty. You don't try to find answers. You create space for the answers to arrive on their own, because you understand. Most of our wounds don't come from circumstances. They come from never having been fully heard, without interruption, without correction, without being told to be strong. You heal through stillness, and in its deepest form. That is more powerful than the wisest words. When people leave your presence, they don't remember what you said, but they remember how they felt. Free to be themselves, free not to perform, free not to strive for some improved version of who they are. Because with you, they experience something profound. Stillness can be the most intimate form of love. 5. Children and animals are drawn to you. There is a kind of affirmation that needs no words, and it comes from beings who have never been socialized into pretending. Children and animals, they're not influenced by appearances, not convinced by clever words, not fooled by outward charm. They sense energy, and they trust that energy when it makes them feel safe. And you are someone they're often instinctively drawn to. Maybe you've never tried to approach a child, but the child walks up to you, looks into your eyes, smiles, and begins to talk in their own language. A dog that barks at everyone in the neighborhood suddenly lies quietly at your feet. A cat, sensitive to every shift in space, chooses to curl up next to you, as if you were the softest pillow in the world. These moments aren't random. They're instinctive recognitions of a healing energy field. Carl Jung once emphasized, what we don't try to prove often has the most powerful influence. Children and animals recognize something in you that adults have forgotten. An inner purity, no imposing, no expectations, no demands for anyone to become anything. You show up as you are, and it is precisely that honesty that soothes the most primal defenses. In a world where people are constantly performing, striving, and measuring themselves against standards, beings who live by instinct, like children and animals, are the most truthful gauges of energy. When they come to you, it means they feel the calm within you, a peaceful field that doesn't overpower, a place where they can breathe, play, and relax. And have you noticed, these moments don't drain you, even when you're doing nothing. It's as if you're already helping, just by being present. That's a kind of invisible magnetism. It doesn't come from technique, but from the essence, and these instinctive creatures, in their silent ways, have confirmed something the rest of the world often misses. You carry healing, without needing to try. 6. You are the calm point in chaos, the one who holds the space steady when everything falls apart. When everything around begins to unravel, some scream, some withdraw, some panic, assign blame, and scramble for control. But you don't do that. You don't rush. You don't panic. You don't avoid. You stand there, breathing steadily, eyes clear, heartbeat slow, and somehow, just your presence begins to still the room. It's not indifference. It's the kind of presence that comes from someone who has already walked through their own inner chaos. Someone who has panicked inside, who has collapsed and didn't know what to do, but got back up and realized not every reaction is powerful. Sometimes, just being still is enough to hold an entire emotional space from breaking further. Carl Jung described this as the activation of the self. When the symbolic center of consciousness begins to operate, it reorganizes inner chaos into harmony. And you, by not trying to control or fix anything, become the safe zone where others begin to recenter themselves. In moments of collective fear, you don't need to speak to reassure. Your calm presence says it all. It's okay, we are still grounded. That message lowers heart rates, lowers defenses. It invites reflection instead of blind reaction. You become an anchor, like the sturdy tree at a storm, like a single candle in a dark room, not bright enough to light everything, but just enough for people to find their bearings again. And do you realize how precious this is? In an era where people react faster than they think, the one who stays calm becomes the one with real influence. No need to shout, no need to command. You bring people back to the center, not through authority, but through energy. And in that moment, you're not just holding yourself steady, you're holding space for everyone else. 2. 7. People say you feel familiar, even if they just met you. I don't know why, but I feel like I've met you before. If you've ever heard someone say that to you after a first conversation, it's not a coincidence. It's a kind of emotional memory, not from the brain, but from the deeper layers of the unconscious. Carl Jung called this the awakening of an archetype within the collective unconscious. It happens when your presence, not your appearance, not your words, but the depth of your energy triggers something ancient within another. It might be the feeling of being unconditionally loved, the peace of feeling at home, the sensation of being held by something greater than logic. And even if they can't define it, they still feel close to you, as if the soul had recognized something it knew from long ago. This familiarity is not superficial. It's not about, we have so much in common. It's the primal recognition of the soul. When it meets a space where it once felt safe, maybe you remind them of a mother who held them when they hurt. Maybe a soul companion from another life. Or perhaps, you are the living embodiment of a feeling they lost long ago. What it feels like to be truly seen. And when that happens, a small door within them opens. They begin to soften, to share, to trust. There's no need to build rapport. The connection has already occurred on an energetic level, long before any words were spoken. You don't have to try to be friendly. Your presence is already a vivid emotional memory. And because of that, you may become someone who deeply influences others, not through persuasion, but through resonance. You awaken a part of them they had forgotten, longed for, or hidden. And when someone touches a part of themselves through you, even if they've just met you, you've already become home. 8. Some people feel uncomfortable or distant around you, and don't know why. There's a strange paradox. The same energy that makes some people feel safe, light, and peaceful can make others feel uneasy. They avoid you, they grow distant, they act cold, even though you've done nothing wrong. Why? Because your presence is too real, and that realness unintentionally reflects back the parts they're still trying to run from. Carl Jung once said, The shadow is everything we refuse to see in ourselves, in order to appear acceptable to the world. When you show up with an unfiltered presence, not pretending, not trying to please, not bending to expectations, you become a mirror, and in that mirror, others are forced to confront the cracks in their own image. This is not your fault, but because you don't play by society's rules. You don't perform, don't chase approval, don't act out someone else's version of likable. You inadvertently expose the false self that others are desperately trying to uphold. And so they react, not with words, but with distance. They avoid you, downplay you, make cold remarks, or act irritated, without any clear reason. You're not being disliked, you're just making them face something they're not ready to acknowledge. Your energy doesn't push, but it presses on what's not authentic, and that creates resistance. Sometimes, you become the source of a productive discomfort. The first condition is necessary for awakening. So don't blame yourself. Don't try to please everyone. One side of healing is soothing. The other side is stirring. You are a wake-up call, not a comfort pill. And if someone feels unsettled around you, it may be the clearest sign yet that your presence is shaking loose the shell they've been hiding inside. 9. You don't try to change anyone, and that's exactly why they begin to change. Most people believe that to help someone, you must do something, offer advice, fix them, rescue them, but you don't. You don't push people to be better. You don't demand that they understand. You don't try to pull them out of their darkness. And it is precisely this that allows others to begin changing. Carl Jung once said, "Do not heal someone by forcing them into your image of who they should be. Be present so they can find themselves." You are that kind of person. You create a space where others don't feel pressured to improve, to be positive, to be right. You offer a neutral ground, where they are not judged, not pushed away, and not pulled toward anything. And in that letting go, that release of all pressure, they finally begin to hear the voice within. You don't force anyone to walk through their pain, but you are living proof that it's possible to walk through it. You don't try to lift anyone up, but your calm presence makes them want to rise. You don't set out to inspire, but the way you carry yourself, quietly and steadily through storms, that is inspiration in its purest form. Most people won't even know why they begin to change after meeting you. They won't remember exactly what you said. They won't think you helped them in any obvious way. But they'll remember the feeling that with you, they were allowed to breathe, allowed to not know, allowed to let go without feeling ashamed. And in that very moment, when their armor drops, when the performance dissolves, something within them begins to shift. You don't heal through intervention. You heal through the right non-intervention. Because you understand this truth, no one changes when they're forced, but everyone begins to change when they feel accepted, even before they've changed. 10. You tend to leave once your work is done, even if you don't know why. Sometimes, you find yourself in a gathering, a conversation, a seemingly ordinary meetup. The laughter is still going, the atmosphere is light, but suddenly, something in you whispers, "It's time to leave." You're not tired, you're not upset. There's no urgent reason, but you just know your presence here has fulfilled its purpose. Maybe you gave someone a look, a hug, a quiet whisper at the right time, or maybe you simply were there when someone needed it most. And once that invisible role is complete, you no longer feel anchored to the space. It's as if a door gently closed, soft but final. Carl Jung once said, "The soul knows many things before the mind understands them." And what do you feel when that sudden urge to leave arises? It is a direct signal from that deeper layer. It's the intelligence of energy. You don't force yourself to stay. You don't search for a reason to cling. You leave, as if listening to a silent instruction. No dramatic goodbye, no need for long explanations. You slip away quietly, and yet, leave a space behind that makes people feel. Something just happened. Leaving at the right moment is an art practiced by those with healing energy. Because you don't heal through prolonged presence. You heal through presence at the right moment. You come like a breeze. And when the breeze has done what it came to do, it does not stay for applause. You don't leave because you're bored. You leave because your intuition knows. The person has received what they were meant to receive. And that is enough. 11. You sense what hasn't been said, the shift in the atmosphere. You walk into a room, and without anyone saying a word, you know something has happened. Averted eyes, a sudden, heavy sigh, a A silence that doesn't feel quite right. No one has spoken, no one has shared anything, but you already feel it. And it's not because you're good at guessing, it's because you listen with your whole body. You read the frequency before the words arrive. You feel the weight of the air. You notice what seems insignificant. A fast blink, a breath that falters, a hand gesture repeated again and again. And through those tiny, quiet cues, you hear something even the other person hasn't yet realized. Something inside them is unraveling. Carl Jung called this symbolic intelligence, the ability to read the unconscious through intuition. And you carry that. When someone says, "I'm fine," you don't hear the word fine. You hear the slight tremble in their voice, the way they turn their head when speaking, the way they hug themselves as if holding their own pieces together. You don't expose them. You don't pressure them to open up. You simply look at them with an expression that says, "I see you," and you don't have to hold it together right now. Sometimes, that's all it takes. A glance, a nod, a silence long enough, and then they begin to open, not because you asked, but because they felt safe. You don't need to guess. You don't need to investigate, because truth always reveals itself to those who have once been shattered and survived. Pain taught you a kind of sensitivity no classroom could ever train. And now, that intuition operates like a quiet radar, helping you connect, helping others feel seen, even before they dare speak a word. 12. People come to you when they're about to break, and they don't know why. They don't call you a healer. They don't plan to come to you for guidance or rescue. And yet, in moments of quiet crisis, they appear, they text, they stop by, they accidentally share something big they've never told anyone. And even they're surprised, saying things like, "I don't know why I'm telling you this." But you understand, you don't attract them with your words or advice. You attract them by frequency. The frequency of someone who has once stood at the edge, fallen into darkness, and found a way out. You're not a savior. You're a marker, a living sign that people can break, and still survive, can fall apart, and still be whole, just in a different shape. Carl Jung called that moment the threshold of transformation, where the old ego collapses so a new self can emerge. But at that threshold, people are fragile. They panic. They turn back. They collapse. And you, with a presence that is light, gentle, and without condition, became their invisible anchor. You don't take over. You don't tell them what to do. You just stay, like a quiet flame, not brilliant, but warm. And that is enough. They come because of intuition. They stay because they feel safe. And they leave with something mended, not fully healed, but enough to go on. Not because you tried to help, but because you let them be fragile. In a world that constantly demands they be strong, you don't know why they chose you, but their soul does. 13. You have known pain, and you've healed yourself in silence. No one taught you how to heal. No one took your hand and showed you the way. There was no magical method to pull you out of the abyss. You learned it by falling and rising again, in silence. No spotlight, no witness, but it was in those moments that the person you are today was shaped. You don't heal others with techniques, with motivational words, or by saying the right thing. You heal through survival, through the nights you curled into yourself with invisible wounds, through the days you smiled outwardly, while collapsing inside, through mornings when you didn't want to go on, but still got up, still showed up, still lived, and little by little, you rebuilt yourself, quietly, without applause, but deeply. Carl Jung once said, "No one becomes enlightened by imagining," and that's exactly what you did. You transformed your pain, the very thing that once wanted to destroy you, into something that helps you understand others, into genuine compassion, not performative, not forced, into a quiet presence that asks for nothing, but others can feel. No one knows that behind your calm is a history of chaos. Behind your soft smile, there are nights of silent crying. But that's why you don't judge. That's why you know when to hold space. That's why you never ask, "Why are you so weak?" Because you've been there. You don't say, "Everything will be okay," because you know some things won't. But still, you sit there, you stay, and that is the most silent form of healing. You don't need to say you've been through pain. People can feel it, in your gaze, in the softness of your voice, where it hurts most, in the way you don't interrupt. When someone breaks open in front of you, Because you know, some wounds don't need advice. They just need someone to sit beside them, without trying to fix anything. And now, even though you don't carry the title of healer, even though you have no certifications or grand techniques, you are doing the most sacred work. You are a resting place for souls on the edge, not because you've never broken, but because you have, and you're still here, whole, peaceful, and strong enough for others to lean on. There's a quiet saying, passed down in healing communities. Those who have once been broken, when they rise, carry an energy that makes others no longer afraid of breaking. And that is you. You don't heal others by knowing everything. You heal by having once known nothing, and still choosing to continue. You don't offer advice because you understand that some pain needs no explanation, only to be heard. You don't teach people how to move through it. You simply stay, and your presence becomes the proof that it's possible to make it through. No one gave you a title, but your silence, your gaze, your wordless empathy is a kind of healing rarely found in this noisy world. You have become a point of stillness in chaos, a shelter under the storm, a candle that doesn't blaze, but glows just enough to guide someone who's lost their way. And maybe you still don't believe this about yourself. Maybe you think, I'm just an ordinary person. But it is exactly that ordinariness, lived honestly, without armor, that becomes a refuge for souls trying to find their way home to themselves. If there's one thing to carry with you from this entire journey, let it be this: the deepest healing doesn't come from what you do. It comes from who you are. And you, with all your breaking, your rebirthing, your silence, your depth, you are that healing. You don't need to have all the answers. You just need to keep living truthfully, the way you always have. Those who need you will find their way to you. And by simply being, you will offer something no one else can, a reason to believe that safe places still exist, even if only for a few silent moments beside you. And if you've made it to these final words, know this: you are not alone. There are others like you, quietly healing the world without ever needing applause.